All right, everybody, welcome into another Car Biz Chronicles Season 3, Episode 2, Wonderful Women of the Car Biz. And today I bring you one of the most wonderful, my girl, Victoria Miller. She's so smart. She's so sharp. She's been in the car business since 2007. She's had a 13-year career. She started in Chicago, much like myself. She's got a very similar story. It inspires even me to want to go back into retail sometimes to work with people like her because she's so awesome. And now she's gone from retail into the consulting side. She's adding value across the country. You're not going to want to miss this. Now, it is cocktail hour, so I get that it's early potentially when you might see the show. So if you like, indulge. Otherwise, wait till tonight. Sit down, have a drinks, and just soak it in. Her knowledge, her approach, it's great. To enjoy this. So thank you so much. Sit down, enjoy Victoria Miller, Season 3 of the CBC, Episode 2. Thanks so much. Welcome in, everybody. Episode 2, Car Biz Chronicles, Season 3, the wonderful women of the car biz. And have I got a treat for you today? I'm joined by one of the most wonderful ones I've ever met. Talking to her before the show, realized it's been over 10 years since we've been working together, knowing each other. It feels like longer than that. Bring in my good friend, Victoria Miller. Victoria, how are you this evening?
I am very good, Sean. Just so happy to be here. Thanks for asking for me.
Oh, you're the best. I'm so glad you agreed to do it. You're such a rock star, and I can't wait to get into all of this with you. We are also having cocktail hour here on the Chronicles. Victoria, please. Thank you. And Joy, yes. Adult beverages. Look, I get it's not lost on me. This show airs at 9 a.m. on Mondays. Okay, it's not, but it's not when it's recorded. So enjoy it in Monday morning and have a cocktail later. Sit down and watch the whole episode. So, Victoria, we want to get started here. You've been in the car business now since when?
2007, right before the bottom.
2007, right before everything freaking changed. And what was your initial role as you got into the biz?
I was just a BDC rep.
BDC rep. That's at a big time Chicago dealership, right? I assume the same place I met you is the same place that you started, right?
Yes, correct.
So you grow from a BDC rep. How does the progression go from there?
Oh, well, the progression was rather rapid for me. So I went through BDC rep to BDC manager to marketing manager to director for the auto group. And basically that was kind of the plateau in that at that dealership.
And that was what, over the next 3 years, basically? Or I mean, how long did it take you to sort of be in that transition?
Oh, I made it probably to that position definitely within 2 years of being at the dealership. Cool. It was quick.
And was that, obviously you're really, really smart. You love what you do. How was it for you sort of going from BDC rep to that? Like, did you do a lot of learning on the fly? Did you do a lot of self-education? Like, how did you get yourself from one position to the next?
I was a sponge. So when I got hired, it was of the essence that you know nothing about the car business. And that was looked upon as the biggest asset that I brought. So I took that and ran, and I did everything that was outside of the box. That was how I would want to buy a car. And, when you're early 20s and you're making these kinds of decisions, it really seemed to impact those digital sales. And, my owner was very adamant that you got to start from the bottom, even if the intention was to have a big title. I still needed to know exactly what I was calling for other people to do. And
your owner knew that better than most. His story is one that is tremendous. And it's something that people, when you understand when a position, when you can go to work for someone like that, it makes going into this business a lot easier, frankly. So yes. You had a wonderful support system. So I don't want to overshadow that. Obviously, you were given pretty much all the assets one would need. I mean, I met you because of an OEM-based program when you and I met. And that's something that had to be funded by someone, right? Dealers have to pay for that. And your dealer was always willing to do that. Was that always something that was, empowering to know that your dealer had your back and was going to be putting forth the money in your own training?
Oh, when you have the dealer principal, the man whose name is on the sign, saying, what is it that we need to be doing to be innovative, to be before the curve of everybody else? that really makes you just kind of shoot for the stars. And instead of just thinking of my little BDC department in this little store, it was, how big can this actually be? What all can I affect?
And since that group has grown, like, you know what I mean? Like, so you've been able to see that from a distance too, to kind of see where your work started. I know I got the same opportunity to do that. The guys I started working for in Colorado, they've now blossomed into this just different group, you know, but it's a beautiful thing to know that you were there in the beginning. You kind of saw it start, and you were in a family business.
Yes.
So it wasn't like, you know, there was no, for you, you weren't family, right? You had to kind of come in and work your way out. How did you find the car business, and what was the last gig before it?
So the last gig before it led me into the car business. I actually was a membership director, oddly enough, at a private country club on the North Shore of Chicago. So, I mean, talk about good times. And
Right.
I didn't swing a club, so we can imagine. But it was just whirlwind. I was, you know, within college, I was trying to figure out what the heck was I going to do? I'll get a real job, but not really a job. And so that was the best thing for me. And I'll tell you, when you get to a position of actually having to sell those memberships and selling the country club as it was, it really got me into a lot of aspects that I carried into the dealership, because you got to talk about selling visual, high impact. If they're not on your grounds, they're not in your building, how are you going to make them want to be there? So, you know, I started doing video and I started networking and just a lot of things that were just very paramount with making my success as a membership director just through the roof. And it caught the eye of a dealership group owner that is here in Chicago. And he's like, you need to come and work for me. You need to apply what you have done with this membership program, selling six-figure memberships to selling cars. And for me, it applied. There was a transition there that I felt very enthusiastic about, because I love cars, always have. So I was very quick to want to talk about it, to want to be it, to want to know everything about it. And then I just kind of showed that enthusiasm through what I would do digitally and how I would get customers to really feel the urgency of why they needed to come and take a look at this car today.
So look, there's a couple of things there. First of all, you do love cars. You are into your cars. I don't know what's in the garage anymore. I mean, I knew it was in the garage a while back. I don't know what's in there now. I'm sure it's just as fun. But you are a car girl through and through. That much you do love that, and that's always fun about you, because you again, you've never really, you don't follow any mold. That's what I do. I enjoy about you and how you go about your business is you go about it for you and what's best for the people you work for. Regardless of who that might be, whether that's what you do now or what you did then, it's always in the best interest of the people you work for. And that really shows through in your work. So good work on that.
Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome. So when you talk about these memberships real quick, let's back up to the six.
Oh, I got some stories.
Membership club stories. Now, I don't want to go too deep. What I'm wondering is when you look at that, and you get into the car business, was what you were being paid to sell those memberships, is it on par with what people would make in the car business? You're selling a six-figure membership. Are you going to make more in the car business or less? Like, how did that go for you?
So believe it or not, I was actually headed off to law school. So I knew that I was looking for a certain type of paycheck. And, you know, I had a dealer owner looking at me dead face in the eye, knowing what my goal was in life, because we had known each other for years at this point. And he's like, girl, you're going to make more money working in the car business and applying what you know to car sales. And, you know, at first it's like, yeah, whatever. But it was just a means of, okay, you know, this person believed in me. Like it felt like a real big girl job. And, you know, I wanted to now, instead of having, you know, the confines of what you do in a private country club setting, where it was just whatever I could think of was going to be what we were going to try. And I enjoyed it.
It's the same for me. It's the almost exact same carbon copy. You know, you go to somewhere who people look at you and they say, look, We trust your instincts. We want you to take this and go your way. And they do it unencumbered. Working with you, things that you and I would talk about, you put into effect, and you wouldn't have to go through some red tape or ask a million people to buy in. You had to get a certain number of people depending on what it was, sure. But for the most part, you could give that autonomy. That's got to be empowering when people trust you, as you say, in your early 20s to make decisions on, let's be straight, right? Multiple stores, you're talking $1 million budget a year in the Chicago market. What was that like at first? Was there ever any, like you being like, oh boy, this, it's a lot, or were you just like, it didn't think anything about it?
Well, I didn't think anything about it, just naiveness as I walked in the door, but I did get an education. And, when we talk about people that mentor you or mold you, I had more instances of people mentoring, but I think the ones that stick out are the ones that, let's say, make your skin a little thicker, that really kind of show you it's not going to be just peaches for the golden child. You're going to have to know what the heck you're talking about and have some assertiveness with it. And I'll tell you, there was some growing pains with that for me. I needed to really understand that not only was I given the power, but I could actually do good with it. I was making right decisions. So it wasn't as if I was flying by the seat of my pants. It was just instinctive to me. So as I grew through and as I had that first initial experience with, managers that were trying to see that or test you, more so of, okay, well, let's just make sure she knows what she's talking about. And, that can get tedious, and definitely on a day-to-day basis when you're having record selling months, but yet you're also having to answer to somebody that's under the GM or DP because they don't really want you to look as good as you do.
Which is so weird, right? Like the infrastructure of a dealership in some cases, even at well-run ones, which you worked at, there's still a divide between what goes on the desk to what goes on with the salespeople to what goes on with the BDC. God forbid it's centralized, okay? And the understanding of all of this, it's where do you think that comes from? Do you think it's because it is such an ego business of a bunch of male macho chest bumping dudes? Like, what do you am I missing something? What is it here?
I think it's the whole connotation of business as usual instead of thinking of the disruptors. Like how many times can we talk about Amazon or a Carvana or a Tesla? I mean, you have to start thinking outside of that box.
Yeah.
And you've got to be meeting these customers, whoever they are, right? I mean, if you want them to buy a car from you, then you need to represent for them. And that's just all that it boils down to. And it for me, it was definitely that education of, this is the boys' locker room, and you're going to need to fit in where you fit in. But I think that as you get a little bit more comfortable and as you have people that don't really follow that norm, and to be honest with you now, it is just not as predominant as I saw it was. So sure. I see it moving. It's just a matter of trying to make sure that it's not, it can all be together. It's culture is everything is kind of the Toyota thing. So if you want it, then you got to be it. And so for me, that's how I treat people like I want to be treated. And that's helped me through my process.
Well, that's going to get you far in life. I can assure you of that. That is a wonderful way to look at anything, especially people to people. When you talk about, because you touched on culture, right? And your gig now is in dealership consulting. That's what you've done. So you've made this jump from retail after a long stint now into this world. I have to ask you, when you get to go into stores now, because that's part of the job, or at least it was, I know stuff's COVID changed probably to some level, but the point is you get to see processes. Mm-hmm. What stood out to you at first when you made the jump to that job, like from being in retail, this 30-day cycle, this, under the thumb, because I made the same jump, right? You go from that to an employee who's satellite, for lack of a better term, right? You kind of work in your own existence, have to go meet certain dealers, etc. What was that like for you in the beginning?
Well, and I know that you're going to feel the exact same way when I respond. I felt like I totally had a leg up because of the experience that I had in dealerships, walking into the consult side. I knew what the language was.
Yeah.
I knew I was asking for this BDC manager to now do, or a GM to now do. So I came with so much more confidence than I ever did in any one of my dealership experiences, just because I knew what the heck I was talking about.
Yeah.
And if you're going to give me pushback, I get that. I've heard those pushbacks. I've probably said them.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we can't overcome.
Doesn't make them not true.
Exactly. Because it's the whole thing of no business as usual. That's just my motto. It needs to be a disruptive process, something that is unlike whatever you have done before, because that's the only way to really make it successful.
I love it. You always talk about this breaking the mold, right? This idea of not doing things the same way as anyone else does and thinking outside the box. I love the idea of no business as usual. Now, easy to say, right? But I think difficult to pull off. In your role, where do you see the breakdown in your experience? Where do you see it where people are like, one side of the room's like, yes, let's do it. The other side says, no, let's not. Like, is it because of people? Is it because of process? Like, how do we just keep staying in the same rut, in your opinion?
So, and I have to give credit to this phrase because this definitely comes from my first owner. He would always say it stinks from the head up, right? So for me, I would say that the most I have to take meetings with GMs and DPs. And that's the reason why I say that is because they're the ones that are going to be able to move the needle. I need to get them enthusiastic of what change we're talking about and how to do it, why to do it. And this is the process that we're going to do for your store. That's the only way to really get it going. I have done the walk of talking to the BDC and evaluating and sitting and just listening. And I can get them all hyped and ready to do something. But the second that they go to a sales manager or a GM and say, this is what we need to do, the delivery just seems to always fall to a point where they don't really trust that this is the right decision. So I'd always have to say that you've got to talk to the ones that are writing the check, because those are the ones, when they see the value in it, they're going to make and they're going to be dedicated to it. You cannot have management that's wish-washy and then we go with the process or bring in a new CRM, for God's sake. And then it's like, oh no, I'm not going to try that. Because when did we ever give it a real try? Because you never were on board. So that's what it is to me. You've got to make movement with the ownership, the management.
So it's got to be the highest level buy-in. And I think I found that in, because you and I had damn near the same jobs. I mean, before we started CarBiz, I was doing what you were doing for another company and another OEM, and the same sort of work, being in the stores, trying to affect change, trying to help people move forward. And I found it to be the same thing. I spent the first 6 months being like, yes, hold hands, BDC managers, yes, yes, yes. And then you start to really get into it. And I was in the Chicago market like you were. I was in some stores where managers got really pissed off. I mean, one guy got so angry, I thought he wanted to fight during the meeting because it was like, look, you can't challenge us this way. You can't ask us these questions. It was like, dude, we got to. Like, no one's asked you these questions up until now because the progression hasn't really existed. But the generation of you and I, people who look, if you stay in the car business from 2007 till today, you learned some shit in 2008, 2009, 2010. So if you're still here, and I don't know this about you, did you get a law degree? Did you simultaneously stay in the car business and get a law degree as well?
So I didn't go to law school. I didn't have the 2 years for the bar exam, but I do have a political science degree and I do have a history degree. So, you might see me as a politician one of these days.
Nice. Oh, well, wouldn't that be fun? That would be interesting. I could see that about you.
That team, right?
I like that. And I happen to know where you are, and that area could use Some good people like you, no doubt about it. So when you're inside the stores, right? When you're talking and you're watching this, you're with a specific OEM. You mentioned it, Toyota. Um, what what's changed through right now? Like what have you seen visibly change at a dealership from that basic level of what it was potentially before all this happened to now from where you sit? Anything stand out?
Yes. So I can't stress enough how the swallowing of the digital retailing tool has been for dealerships, and how much it's been kind of forced upon them when we even talk about COVID. And I started doing video, when you were walking in my store, I was doing video. I was social branding. I was doing the things that we talk about now that are have tos.
Correct.
I was walking that walk. And I was doing it myself. I wasn't getting a vendor that came in that did it for me.
Correct.
So,
doing it before that. Like, see, that's my version of taking pictures and uploading them individually to Auto Trader, to Cars.com from a laptop. Victoria, this was a miserable time, okay? But that's what you were doing when I met you. That was a requirement. Fuck, I forget what the CRM was that you were. I thought you were trying to integrate into email if you had. Did you? I don't remember. Were you using it in your email communication?
Yeah. So that's what prompted our CRM change. I mean, when I talk about the things that I changed in that auto group that they still do today.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing. CRM, we had to change that because we needed to make sure that we could put in an HTML for a video and it wasn't an attachment. It was a link. It was going to get through spam filters. I mean, I can't even tell you the growing pains. So when I talk to a dealership about starting video today, I feel like my grandma. Well, gosh, back in the day, can you imagine? Because that's what we're talking about. I mean, if I could just turn on my phone.
10 years ago, though, yeah.
That's how fast it happened.
The phone you had 10 years ago, you wouldn't use today. That's why you don't have it.
No.
So, yeah, but nothing has. The thing is, nothing has changed. It's still a meet and greet business. It's still a value proposition business. That hasn't changed. So you brought up the DR word. You watch me enough. You've talked to me enough. You know I do not care for this terminology. I do not care for where we're headed with this. It is stuffed down people's throats. It's stuffed down dealers' throats before the consumer's even ready for it. So where do you stand on the matter? And how do you sort of balance it from putting on your dealer hat, which I know you wear actively, but you also work for people. And I get, I want to be sure I don't put you in any hot water because you do work for people, but where do you stand on the whole thing? And how do we move forward with it?
It is a great tool for a dealership that is ready. And when I say ready, we're talking about maybe 10, 15% of the upper dealerships that are really ready to do a digital retailing tool. And it's got to be, because it's not like taking an Elite. I mean, that whole process has to be so defined. And think about it, when you're off by just a couple of cents, let's go a little further. When you're off by 10s, 30s, and there's a discrepancy, do you think that customer is going to pick up the phone and now call you? No. They're going to close it out and they're going to go to the next website and they're going to find the next car. So I agree 100% about the pace that a dealership needs to take, because it's like that 101 versus 401. If you're not even doing well with the 101 directives of lead handling and making sure that just your given consumer that is on websites right now is not successful, then why would you try to do all of it, A to Z, online?
Look, I've said this before on my show. I said it when I asked the question when I was up in Canada. The last time I spoke publicly in Canada was last September. And I asked the question, guys, how many of you will work a car deal over the phone? A room of whatever, 30, 40 people. Victoria, no one raised their hand. And then someone goes, what about digital retail? And I thought, are you out of your mind? What are you talking about? You can't even wrap your head around selling a car via the phone, which again, I go back to you and your process. And even before that, my process in 2007, 2006, when I told the dealer, look, we are going to get you on we are going to sell a car right now to this guy who lives in the mountains of Colorado. We are not going to meet him in person. We are not going to be, we are going to, why would you do that? Because he wants to buy a car. We have the car. Why would we not sell it to him, right? People were so put off by the idea of selling a car over the phone. How do we make it? How do we make digital retail fit into the consumer and dealership process better? Because right now it's shoehorned, it's forced, it's on there because it's required. If leads come in, imagine you getting a digital retail lead and handling it like you would a third party lead.
You were wasting so much money.
But you know it. But you know this is what's happening because these tools are on these sites. I've joked about they're going to look like Kmart's in the next 3 years. It's just going to be abandoned on these dealership sites with no support because no one gives a shit about it because they haven't really understood the buy-in. But as you mentioned, the buy-in has to come from the very, very top of it. Would you buy a car that DR? Straight DR? Would you do that?
I would. And the reason why I would is because I am comfortable with, and it probably has to do with the hot rod situation, but I'm comfortable with receiving a vehicle that's been sitting in some barn for the last 40 years on a transport. But there's a lot of, and when I talk about before, when dealer principals and GMs need to be involved in those decisions, because when you're talking about DRT, you're talking about way more than providing a third-party tool on your website. You're talking about what kind of laws does our state require? What legality does it involve my dealership to sell a car in a driveway? How do I transport that vehicle? And, that's when you have thought about everything that it's going to get better.
Yeah, you're right. It is about understanding it from the back to the front with the process. Because if you just try to make it what everyone else does, then it won't be successful. And I don't think the volume's there. I'm like you, please, with the Amazon and all the comparisons, please just stop all that. Just meet the customer where they want to be met. But I'm telling you right now, if you're open to DR, you'll sell more cars over the phone and text than you will worrying about a third-party tool, just from a communication standpoint. Victoria, could you imagine having all the tools? I'm saying this like now we're both grandma and grandpa. Can you imagine having all the tools that exist today? And you've only been out of retail for what, less than 5 years, right?
Yep.
The advancement of technology from there to there. Imagine what you have in these dealerships. Sometimes when I sit back and I recommend products, because as you know, that's our whole life, understanding the vendor space and what products work and what don't. When you go and you recommend these, you think to yourself, well, now, damn it, if I had that, I would do this. Does that happen to you a lot, or is that just me being old and nostalgic?
Absolutely not. I think about that all. I've got a whole plan. I'm going to have this dealership and it's going to be run like this. And it's going to this is going to be the way of how I'm going to do it. And I'll tell you, when anybody wants to listen, I will tell them exactly what my business model is, because I'm looking for investors. So who wants to go? Because I just think, and it goes that whole, out of the box. And that's for me, something that I would definitely take. But you've also got to work with these OEMs. And when we talk as like business as usual, and I feel like this is the more impactful part of my job, I'm now not just in a regional situation, I'm national. So if I come up with something, or if I've pushed a process or a way to do things, it's 1,200 stores. There's an effect there that, definitely makes the data support or not support. And you've got to pay attention to that.
You bring up two interesting points. Number one, your dealerships, we would probably make great partners because, as you know, I am not a fan of the OEM. I do not care for that part of the world, but you do, and you do well, and you do great, and they love you, and that's all a thing. So I think there's something there because I'm not interested in that portion of the world. So let's keep that in the back of our hats. But when you talk about the effect, I think that's why, we started CarBiz because a dealer. Basically, I went to a dealer friend of mine and said, hey, I want to buy a store. And he said, why buy one store when you could potentially impact hundreds of stores? And I thought, what are you talking about? And he got into this whole idea of what he was looking for and how he thought others would be looking for the same thing and so on and so forth. And here we are 7 years later. And that's what we've done. How cool is it when you're able to see things you've done get progressed throughout your team, right? People are like, wow, this works, this happens. And then I need you to, because that's going to be fun to answer, and I want you to answer that. How frustrating is it sometimes when things you think are potentially on the right track maybe don't fit a mold that potentially other people in the hierarchy are looking for? That's how I'm going to ask it as political as I can. And so, politician in training, how do you answer that question?
So for me, I would say that, all markets are different and all customers are different. And if there's one thing that a dealership should know is who their customer is. So instead of me dictating to you how to gain your market share, then I'll listen to what you've got to say and let's figure out the resolution together. Because not one thing, and I think that's the big picture part, right? So when you're talking about nationally, there's definitely a bigger picture to embrace. You're talking about LA to New York. So, all of those markets in between can be extremely different. And there's going to be things that are going to be more successful. I mean, I don't even want to get into pay-per-click and things like that, where, the amount of money that people spend in a Chicago market versus Indy, let's not even talk. But
please don't. I don't. Because that's what I do for a living. You know that, and that's all we watch. And we see people who are, I have a great client in Kansas who, when I first met her, the SEM provider was like, look, you have to spend X. And I'm like, look, I don't have a Chevy dealer in Chicago spending that kind of money. So how is it possible in any frame of the world that you need that? So wasted spending will, I don't know if we have enough time to get into that today, but if we do, we will. So when you're talking about impacting change on those levels, though, so are you saying that that certain things that you see work in the Midwest potentially do not work in LA or New York? Is that what you're alluding to?
Oh, yes. And there's models there, let's just talk about vehicles that just are purely not successful when we talk about Midwest compared to LA. So, and that's something that obviously is just a big picture type of problem. And it's not something that's going to affect the dealer in mini.
I like that. I like how you look at that. So when you talk about models, again, you think about from a sourcing perspective, right? Why do we still ship all those models then to those areas if we don't sell those cars? But I'm not here to.
Listen, colors. There's a crazy color scheme that Portland has that, is not Chicago. No, that car would be burned in 5 seconds before it would be.
Look, for the brand that you and I met at, okay, they just came out with this new vehicle and it has this like two-tone paint job that I came across. It's like a burnt orange on top and a gray on the bottom. And look, Victoria, I thought I was old, right? But I'm like, this is disgusting. Like, who thought of this? My buddies were like, what? Super hip, super cool. I was just like, oh no.
It's a different kind of beast.
Do you like being like, where do you want to go next? Right now, you're sitting in, you're sitting in your consultant role. Do you look to move up within the consulting role? Do you like where you're at? You just kind of dig the deal? What's next for Victoria?
The pie in the sky for me is, I would ultimately like to be on the executive board of an OEM. I want to be able to really make a change that would be from the top down. And, sometimes that kind of takes the lone wolf. So for me, that's where I want to go.
Wow. I already commend you. And because you're off to the right start, because you get it. You understand both sides of it, and you're willing to be patient with the process enough to let it pay off for you as you see your long-term vision. I think that's a difficult thing for a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people can do that. I think a lot of people see, what's in front of them, maybe what's, 10 feet in front of them. Where do you get that from? Do you know? Have you always been that way? Someone who sees it further and can be more patient, or is that something that you've developed as we've all gotten older and wiser as they sold us?
I would have to say, and if my sister was here, she would say it's because she's the baby. So I always have never really known that it's not possible. I was always told you could be whatever the heck you want to be. Dream it, make it happen. So if I don't think about it, if I don't plot a course to it, then how the hell am I ever going to get there? It may be a dream, but to me, it's goals. And until I get to that next goal, and you know how I am with goals, I will work at it until I get it. And then I'm moving on, and I've got to have another one to kind of keep me going.
You love you some goals. You
I
love
do.
you love you a goal. You love you a good spreadsheet. You love you a good track down. That
It's so
that
true.
is up your alley big time. And I like that. So you talk about I have it here. Basically you were raised with this idea that anything is possible. Sky is the limit. When you sit back and you start to plot that, when you talk about goals, are you doing things incrementally? You have like weekly goals, monthly goals? Like how granular do you get in your goal setting world? Because I find the whole goal world unique because I'm anti-goal. I do not like goals. I do not use them. I do not have any of them that I've written or talk about. But I'm intrigued because it's a different way to do things. How do you do that? How do you plan the goals and how do you stick to that?
It is definitely ebb and flow. There are times in my life when I have far more goals or aspirations. And then there's other times where it's like, I need a breather. I just need to sit here in this time and just marinate and think of what it is that I do want to take as the next step. And, to me, the whole goal of the OEM wasn't something I thought about maybe 4 years ago, for that matter. It's until I started having a regular interaction and I could really see that the decisions that are being made that are going to affect so many dealerships and affect how business is being done, that was where I felt was going to be the most impactful. So it adjusts itself. I as my look into politics, as my look into being a dealer owner, it's like, let me think of all these different things that I could possibly do. And then if I accomplish one of them, it's success. I don't
Goals
want to
accomplished.
wallow in the failures because it's learning experiences, right? Just pick it up and move on.
Most definitely, most definitely. I don't look back. Anything that I've ever failed at, I failed at for a reason. You know what I mean? As far as it teaches you what you need to know. I'm not a regret guy. I don't really have time for that because I try to live in the now. I don't really want to start worrying about what I could have changed because I think that that's a string theory, right? So you change that and that just pulls the string on everything else. And now everything else is different. And I wouldn't want that because where I sit today is some days I pinch myself. So that's not really the difference. But for you, seriously,
Mhm.
would you really go back into a dealership role or would it only be in an owner based scenario for you?
Owner based would be ideal. Managing partner would be fun. But I'm not walking into a dealership unless I do have the authority to sign the check, or I do have the authority to make those changes. And until that's something that a dealer is willing to do, then that's where I'll stay. I'll open my own, and I'll do it there.
I like that. I've always told my wife if I just sent her to the academy, got her certified, as a dealer, people would throw money. It's women, right? You and I have talked about this. We've joked about this before that like there's certain things if you really have the drive and passion, there's a lot of opportunity that's becoming available finally after decades of the same old shit. There's real opportunity there. So that's really, really exciting, which ties me into sort of how I want to close this up. You are a strong-willed woman, grew up in the Chicago car business. How do we get more women involved in our great business? Because you and I both agree it's wonderful. It's paved the way for our lives, how we go about our lives. It's given us the affordability to do in our lives, for the most part, what we like and when we want to do it. How do we bring more people into the fold and get them involved?
You need to embrace the lack of experience. When you're looking at filling your staff and who is best for this and that, dealership world, I haven't met one person that has gone to school to run a dealership beyond people that were born into the business, right? I mean, there's not anybody that's like, I'm going to go to Florida and take that.
Yeah, no one just goes to Northwoods like, yeah, so I'm going to go learn about the car business, then I'll go get into it. Like, that's not how this works. No.
That's not how we got here.
Yeah, you get educated once in it, sure, but you don't just decide. It's not like an elective somewhere at community college you can sign up for. Not a thing.
Yeah,
no.
Not even close. No. So, I would say, and this was, honestly what my first owner did was he was looking for traits, for qualities that are going to make that ideal employee. And, didn't help that it did help that he actually saw what I was doing in a previous job. But I think that when you are ready, and I've heard it so many times, no, they just don't have that experience. Why would you want that? I wouldn't want to have to reprogram. I would just rather say, this is how we do things, or what's your new eyes see about the process that we do? How can we improve it? Why wouldn't that be a good thing?
Yeah, because if I don't care if you've sold anything, and even if you haven't necessarily sold anything, if you've been a customer service driven business, if you are a waiter, waitress, bartender, I mean, I'm just telling you, if you have people skills, you can apply it to the car business. And there's just I don't know, to me, you're going to help people with the second, sometimes the first biggest purchase of their lives.
Oh, yes.
And that's meaningful still to me. I assume the same for you.
Oh, yes. And, I think about my first car buying experience. It was the shittiest experience you can even imagine. I mean, I had the money. I took my father because I'd never been in a car dealership. So it's like, show me how to do this. When I was completely ignored, even to the onslaught of my dad saying, you should talk to her. She's got the checkbook, but repeatedly. And to me, I was like, I didn't know I was going to be in the car business by any way. And every time I sat in the chair to sell a car or to talk to a customer or to send an email, I thought about that experience. And it made me do the exact opposite every single time. I'm not here to force you into your car deal today. I'm here to help you into your car deal. And there's just a different mindset that I think, and I'm not going to go to the aspect that only women think that way versus men, because I don't feel that way. I know you, in fact, feel, where you're more resourceful, helpful.
Oh yeah. No, it's always about, I was just telling someone the other day that my favorite part of selling a car is when I can't get you to close and the manager has to come over and I sit between my customers, put my arm around them and be like, hey, let's go get this manager. Let's go get you your car, and it's this idea, and it's because it's bought in, and I don't know if you caught it, but I had my therapist on,
yes.
Jessica, and she talked about how it's that flash in the brain. We've always joked about, best time to sell a car is right after you sold one. She's like, yeah, that's actual chemical reaction in your brain that is telling you, like, let's keep going. And I thought, that's stuff I can't replace. If I joke about it, and I should do more of it. I used to go out to my buddies' dealerships on Saturdays and just shag ups. Take it all the way through and then just give it to a salesman. Have a nice day. Take no money because I don't care. I should do more of it, though, because it's super awesome.
And then you get bit by the bug, though. That's the problem.
No, I can't. Right.
That's what you say now. And then I'm going to find you at the top of Estes Park selling Subarus.
I mean, look, it's possible. You never know if it all went well. Of course you would do it. I
might be with you. Maybe that's the new dealership.
That's what I'm saying. Look, and I've got connections there. We know people in Colorado in the Subaru world, so we've got legs to stand on there. But Victoria, the last thing I want to ask you, kind of with this whole thing, is we have wonderful women in the car business. We talk about how it can be. What's one piece of advice you give to women getting into the business or that are already in it, as far as, I don't want to say survival because that sounds so shitty, but to persevere, to exist in the space? What's that one piece of advice you'd give?
Observe everything that you possibly can witness, that you can be involved with, that you can have some type of training with, because that is the only way that you're going to really know what you're talking about. And if I tell you that you're tested with everything that comes out of your mouth, you need to have the facts, the support behind it. and know that after I've said my piece, it is what it is. And then we'll walk out the door and we'll have something else to talk about tomorrow. But you've got to just at least know what the heck you're talking about and just have some grit behind it. And it takes a little, I mean, like I said, my skin definitely got thicker from my first experience. And I'm not the same person that I was the day I walked in, just like a lot of us feel. But that would be the one thing if I had to say to my younger self, you know, just observe, listen, and you'll be able to know the steps to take when it's your turn.
Wonderfully said. What a way to go out. Victoria, you rock. I really, really, really appreciate you coming on and doing this for me. You guys can find Victoria. She's on LinkedIn. She'll be tagged as a part of the show as well. You can check her out. This is the second episode of the season. Victoria, thank you again for being on it. We do appreciate it. And guys, please tune in again. Next week, I'm going to be bringing you more wonderful women of the car biz throughout this season into the holidays. Yeah, it's going to be wonderful. So thank you again, everyone, for joining, and have a wonderful week.
Love you, Sean.
Thank you, Victoria.